What if I told you there was 5 things that you could be doing to make better alternative grunge riffs, or even play along to some of your favourite grunge songs with a better understanding of what's going on and the tones that they were using? Well, luckily enough, I think there is. Today we're going to look through 5 tips that I think will help you make better music for sure. Now, if you've watched any of the other videos on this channel, you'll know that I'm a huge proponent of detuning or alternative tunings in general. My main go-to is actually drop D, but I love all sorts of drop and open tunings. But there's a tuning that I think often gets overlooked, and that is E flat standard, where you're basically just tuning your whole guitar down half a step, but keeping it in standard tuning. Now again, I mention this band on this channel all the time, but pretty much every one of Smashing Pumpkins' tracks post Siamese Dream is in this tuning. I know obviously sometimes they go into drop tunings from there, but it's kind of all based around that E flat standard tuning. What you actually get from this tuning that you don't get from standard is by basically tuning half a step down, everything just sounds that little bit looser and darker in my opinion. Now obviously there's probably a million different Smashing Pumpkins songs that I could play, but one that I know is in this tuning is Bullet with Butterfly Wings. And I think just hearing that intro in E flat standard, I think you'll understand what I mean about it just sounding that little bit darker. And actually, another song within this genre that uses a similar tuning is Heart-Shaped Box. But what Nirvana did is just go a step down, so E flat standard, and then they dropped what is now the E flat to a C sharp. So it's like a drop D tuning, but the whole guitar tuned half a step down. And now I'm just going to haphazardly play that to show you what I mean. Obviously those tracks there didn't have a whole load of distortion on them, but this can really work with absolutely loads of fuzz added too. And we're going to be sticking around in E flat standard for this next tip. It's going to be about multi-tracking guitars. Now I know I've featured this before on the channel in a whole home recording video that I made, but I still think people are overlooking it, and I don't think I fully explained myself enough in that video. Multi-tracking guitars really takes the music that you're making to the next level, and I'm not just talking about copy and pasting after you've recorded it, because basically what you're wanting is those little imperfections that you make when you play, because it just makes stuff sound way wider and thicker. It's exactly the same with double tracking vocals or adding like massive chants to stuff. You basically just want to layer and layer and layer because it just sounds so thick. It almost creates like a chorus effect without actually using that effect. Now the Smashing Pumpkins actually double tracked so many guitars on Siamese Dream that it drove Butch Vig nuts. He said it just completely ate all the cymbals in the mix. And what was Billy's response?
So it was a lot to handle. It killed all the cymbals, but that's the sound of that record.
There's actually an interview with Butch where he says that on Soma and Hummer there was up to 40 different guitar tracks. He said they weren't all playing at the same time, but there could be 8 to 10 different overdubs all playing at once, and then you get another 8 to 10 for the next section. I absolutely love that, and sometimes I drive my band up the wall trying to add more and more guitars. One thing I do think is worth mentioning here is trying to change between pickups or different guitars or different amps, so there's slight variations in the sound, and they'll fill in those frequencies like little tiny Lego blocks until you just get one solid wall. Another way to do that as well is to play like octaves of the chords, higher and lower, and that will just sound huge. And as we've been talking about the Smashing Pumpkins, I'm basically going to play a bit of a Today rip, and I'm actually playing it in the E flat tuning, so it's not actually in the key that Smashing Pumpkins played it, but here we go. Hi, Future Dan here. I'm really sorry I completely messed up and forgot to film myself actually playing to this track. So instead, I'm going to do something that I did before that's also double tracked, and this is how it goes. I think that sounds pretty huge. I'm really happy with how that came out. Okay, moving on to point number 3, and that's going to be all about chorus pedals. I basically only ever used chorus pedals on slow rates because I just thought they sounded way cooler like that and way more modern. But sometimes, if you get really deep fast ones, you can get some cool sounds. Now I know Black Hole Sun was using a Leslie speaker that was basically oscillating or something, and I actually have one of those in the other room as part of an old organ. And I've put my guitar through it before and it sounded pretty cool. Maybe I should put that on a video at some point. I think a quick deep chorus can get you somewhere close to that Soundgarden tone. And I know I keep bringing this pedal up, but it's called Bleach, it's obviously like a grunge pedal, and actually this chorus is amazing for these type of sounds. I absolutely love the small clone and the neo clone and stuff, but I just don't think that they can give you that cool, weird, trippy sound that you get from this on the higher settings. Now I don't really know how to play this song very well, and actually online it's kind of a weird one because I think it's in like a really weird tuning, and so I apologise because this is probably going to sound nothing like Black Hole Sun, but it's somewhere around the same idea, and I basically just want to show the sound that you can get, and you might be able to play it way better than me, and then you can use that sound to get you closer, or you can just write some really cool stuff with that warbly chorus sound. The next tip is actually to do with Pixies, and you could say they're technically not a grunge band, but what even is grunge anyway?
What is grunge? The comments on this episode, oh my lordy. It's saucy.
I'd say they're an alternative band, and they're probably a precursor to some of the grunge bands. I mean, Kurt Cobain literally wanted to be in the Pixies. But the thing that they're using, and I think you should start using yourself, is the third as a major chord instead of a minor. In Where Is My Mind, obviously it's in the key of E, and the chord progression goes E, C sharp minor, G, and A. But really, in this key, this G sharp here should actually be a G sharp minor. And if that was the case, this is how the chord progression would sound. But it doesn't. They make the G sharp minor a major. So it ends up sounding like this. And just something about that feels like it's climbing to that next note, and I absolutely love it. You also hear that third as the major in a lot of the stuff that was also out after the Pixies in like the 90s. Bands like Long Pigs had chord progressions that sort of went like... Very cool. I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of the alternative rock and grunge stuff was actually in a major key, which is kind of weird considering you have like the dark nature of the lyrics and the bands and the style of how they looked and stuff and how they played. Maybe that's what differentiated it from other genres at the time, because it was that little bit more major. But anyway, there's something that I need to get off my chest. I basically made a video about pedals I didn't think you should buy, and there was probably one pedal in particular that people kept mentioning that they thought I'd got wrong, and that is a phase shifter. Now in my opinion, I thought it was a little bit dated, and I couldn't see how you could get it to work in modern music that well. But people kept telling me that if you got a phaser, it doesn't matter which one I guess, if you got one and then kind of rolled it back and got it really slow, you could get some epic lead parts with it. And so yet again, we're going to rip off Billy Corgan because he loved to do that. Now I know grunge and alternative music isn't all about the solos and stuff, but there is solos, however, they're very melodic, and they seem to somehow cut through the mix like an absolute animal, despite there being like 40 different tracks of guitar on stuff. And obviously we've established that Billy Corgan used a phase shifter on his solos, but he also used one of my favourite kind of pedals, an octave pedal. I've actually got a couple of different things that can do octaves. The Digitech Whammy, which is an amazing pedal, and I use that live all the time, but also the Hog pedal as well. And actually I think this probably just gives you a few more parameters that you can use, and you can utilise those individual octaves easier. And I think when you combine an octave pedal and a phaser and like loads of fuzz and stuff, you can get some amazing lead sounds that just cut through the mix so well and are just right at the forefront of it. Let's have a quick look at the signal chain we've got going on here. This is the signal chain for the solo. Basically, we've got a bit of the original signal, and then we've got a lower octave and an upper octave as well. And this is actually the dry signal as well, so I guess it's just blending in that original with the octaves. And then we go over to the plumes. We've got a little bit of overdrive here on the third setting. Now I probably could have done this with the op-amp Big Muff, but I chose to use the Warlow because I just love the mids that it adds into it. And finally it was into the small stone on a fairly slow rate and the bottom colour, so it's not quite as intense. And I reckon we should put it all together and play a solo-y lead part over the Pumpkins song that we heard earlier. Now I'm not in any way promising this is anything close to the Cherub Rock solo, but it sounds pretty cool, I think. I really wish I was better at lead parts. Like, I think that sounded really cool, but something sounded like a little bit clunky about it. I've actually been thinking, in the new year, maybe it's time that I concentrated on getting a bit better technically. I've always kind of prided myself on my ability to make progressions and just kind of listen to stuff and add parts to it. But actually I think it would be really cool to play a little bit more fluid with my lead lines. Let me know in the comments if there's some resources you can recommend for me to get a little bit more technical, and maybe I'll actually do some like challenges on it and stuff in the new year. Anyway, it's that time again. I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know what you thought, and then please watch this video here next. And until next time, keep on making noises.